Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at the first submission by Louise of her horse Rutan. Rutan is a 12-year-old cold-blooded trotting horse, and the horse had evidently been quite abused when she got the horse. It was just sounds like it just didn't want anything to do with human beings. It had enough, and Louise has done a really wonderful job of bringing this horse along, as you will see here. Just right in the very beginning here, let me say that you're doing a wonderful job with this, and there isn't much else that I would do much more differently in terms of this part of the work that you're doing here. Now you can see here the horse starts out a little bit slow, but you do a really good job of getting the horse active and coming forward. And this is a really interesting horse to see and to consider, because as you'll see the trot work later on with this horse, this is one of those horses that just even here in the walk, you see how the neck kind of goes straight down. Now, what you want to do when a horse does that is just send it on more actively. But if you get it to stay there and it stays there actively, as this horse does, but still wants to have the horse still wants to have its head long and straight down from the neck, kind of from the shoulder there, so to speak. You want to just let them do that. As long as they're active, you'll know that you are developing the top line. And what will happen is the neck will just start to carry itself up and out all by itself. But that's what you want to have happen. Remembering that the horse, it's not just a physical thing of training it to put itself in this position. The body has to be trained to be in that position, and the horse has to go through those physical changes that have to take place from working correctly. As the horse stretches there, that withers is going to pull up through the shoulders. And you'll see how the back here with this horse, though pretty good, is still going to come up a lot more from where it is now. There's still a little dip in this horse's back, and even though you've done a good job of getting the horse quite fit, so we don't have the big pendulous belly that we see on a lot of these horses. These are interesting horses because, I'm not real familiar with them. We don't see a lot of them in the States, but though we do have smaller, drafty kind of little horses that look like this. But it's interesting that they actually use these horses for trot racing, so they actually are capable of getting quite fit. But because of the cold-bloodedness of them, I think they kind of, very quickly put on weight, and they're a little long in the back, so the back starts to sag, as is the biggest problem with all horses that come from cold-blooded stock, which were usually field plow horses and this sort of thing originally, and carriage horses and this sort of thing, which were bred to be very quiet and kind of heavy, especially the plow type ones. So they tend to go to fat very easily, and they get very big in their middle section. So once again, if we don't keep them in shape, the body of the horse itself, that is the mass of the horse, if we don't keep it strong over the back, will just start to pull the back down. So I tell people that all this time, they very often overweight people will buy these big horses thinking they can carry them, when in fact, that's not the kind of horse that they need at all. Because, for instance, even like a horse like this, that is not a big one, but its body is so big that it has a lot to deal with to carry its own weight. So these horses need to be really in shape to carry weight, or the weight of their own midsection just kind of drags them down to the ground, so to speak. So you get the idea. They need to be fit in order to do this, as do all horses. But as I said, these ones seem to go to fat very quickly. When they're not racing, they seem to just kind of turn into these very fat little stiff things very quickly. So you've done a great job with this one. And you can see how the belly is nicely pulled up. And as soon as you started that trot work, it just came right up underneath him like that. And here's what I talk about. You see how this horse's neck is just kind of straight down. But when it's straight down is when you have the optimal trot. So where do you want it to be? You want to let it to be all the way straight down. See how it gets down there? And now we get a little more bounce in the trot, though you could send it on just a little bit more. But that's really what we want. We want to keep that sense. And you can see when the horse's head comes up, all of a sudden the back drops a little bit, and that nice big swing and that little sense of a bounce kind of disappears a little bit. So we have to let the head and neck be wherever it is, as you are doing. That lets the horse move the most efficiently. Remember always that that's what this is all about. Too often people are almost trying to create a still picture, but that's not what riding is all about. It's about motion and movement. So it's what the horse looks like when it's moving, not just what the head and neck looks like when it's standing still. So you've done a really good job here. Once again, it looks like you must be in Sweden from the looks of things there. So it looks like at least there's not a lot of snow on the ground. This isn't as snowy as some of the videos that we get, so hopefully things are starting to clear up over there. I'm certainly looking forward to coming back to Sweden myself here this spring and seeing everybody that I worked with last year, as well as all of our new friends, as it's going to be very much fun. I hope a lot of you who are over there can make it to the clinics and especially with people like Annie who have really got a good start last year, and Tutti, that have been doing this for a while. You'll really get to see what happens and how much more we can do once these horses have top lines. So hopefully I'll see lots of you over there. And of course, there's the Norway thing as well, which is going to be lots and lots of fun. We'll have our retreat there from the 6th to the 13th, and we'll be doing jumping as well as working on the dressage horses, as well as doing a lot with the World Dressage Federation. So anyway, I look forward to seeing everybody over there this summer. It's going to be a lot of fun. And hopefully I'll see this one. So once again, coming back here to the walk, we can see the walk now has become more active after that trot work. It's a little more swinging. But we see how this kind of horse, they want to just kind of go back to that very lazy kind of walk, that kind of look like they're pulling their feet up out of mud. But you're doing a great job of just sending the horse back actively. So everything you're doing here is exactly what I would like to see. Now in your next video, it'd be interesting to begin to see this horse with some tack on a little bit. And I saw another video on your site there of somebody riding the horse and stretching the horse. So maybe the next one we can begin to see some riding work as well, which would be great. Because it certainly looks to me like you're ready for that with this horse. And of course, once again, you've proven over and over again, as so many have you over there who are working with these kinds of horses and watching them come around, to see how athletic they become, how completely different they look after a year of correct top line work. They no longer look like plow horses. And it's just too bad that too many people, a lot of people who trot horses don't really understand that if they were trotting over their backs, they'd be trotting a lot faster. Just like with race horses, a horse that's not over its back, running over its back, and there's plenty of them on the track, most of them, their stride is going to be a lot shorter. Get a horse working over its back, and you'll go win races. Or you'll win trotting races in the case of these horses. Whenever a horse is hollow, you're always losing a great deal of the movement, because the thrust can't work through the horse's back, so you're losing a lot of movement that's not getting directed in the direction that you want it to go, so to speak. Lovely here. Now, once again, notice as he goes up and down, watch what happens with his trot. As he gets down there, it starts to bounce a little more. We get that little sense of cadence, like right there, and you see how it kind of has that little moment of suspension, and that's what we're looking for. Like right there. That's really nice. So while it didn't change much, it just got a little bit more bounce to the stride. And you see how as he comes up, it kind of gets a little flatter. He gets right there, and look how much rounder the hocks are. So that's what we're always doing, is trying to find that optimal moment. Where does the horse move directly? The most correctly, that is, and the most efficiently. That optimal trot. Right there. So as this horse develops, you'll be able to maintain that, and the neck will just start to carry itself up and out all by itself, which I imagine this one has already done, since you're, to some degree, for the length of time that you've been doing this, compared to where you started, I'm saying. And of course, that would hold true with how many behavioral issues. She said when she started this horse that, it bit and it didn't like any kind of human contact, it sounds like. But of course, why would horse? When you think about what most horses' lives are like, even with well-meaning people who just don't know any better, and unfortunately that's many, many people in the horse world today, because they're simply doing what somebody told them to do, often cases some professional who told them this is how horses have to be handled, that type of thing. So I don't think anybody goes into working horses with the idea, hey, I want to just go be cruel to animals and break them down. They don't. But they depend on professionals, and it's the professionals who are letting people down all over the world by simply not being educated enough to know how to do it in a way that they're not destroying the animals in the process. But I've never seen one yet, and I've worked some very, very difficult cases, horses like Balador, like Dexter that I showed. These horses had just been so checked out to humans. But as I said, remember, imagine what their life is like. Even if it's just being ridden upside down feels uncomfortable. So every time a person comes to get them out of the stall, they're taking them out to do something that makes them feel miserable or sore, or they actually beat on them and these kind of things, or hang on their mouths and pull and fight with their mouths. So you can imagine that horses that that have that treatment every day, it's they call it Stockholm syndrome, isn't it? Something like that, where people are locked up when people are caged, and brought out um, when people are hostages and this sort of thing. So I think it's the same thing with horses. They just, they don't want anything to do with people after a while, because their experience are, that's why they always like the guy who feeds them and not their owners. I've heard people actually say, "Oh, he loves the groom, but he doesn't like me." Well, you're the one that gets on and rides him and beats him up. So don't, and your horses will become very friendly and nice, like this one has become. In other words, if we have their best interest at heart and we actually understand what that actually means, that is, that we have to understand how to work them in a way that is best for them. And if we do that, they just totally change and they become willing partners, and that's what we want. So you've done a great job. All that lunging work there was very, very well done. Once again, we could see how he got all the way down there, and when he did, that's the stride that we wanted for the most part. And here your work in hand is also quite good. There, all the way down in that stretch. That's really nice. And look how beautifully this horse just goes along. You can see here that you're already beginning to establish those principles that we want a trained horse to have. That is, we don't want to be constantly fussing with a horse. A trained horse, you put them in, to the gear you want, so to speak, and they will want to stay there. And, most of the time, unless if we don't overdo it, until we want to do something different. And that's what we're looking for. So that, kind of like having a car with cruise control. Once we get it up to speed, we just kind of set it and it will want to stay there. Well, that's how a correctly trained horse is, And as long as we're sensitive to its needs, that is, and when it starts to get tired, that we let it back out of that frame again, you'll find that they will be more willing and happy to stay in those frames for as long as they can, and they'll even try for you. Once again, if you get to that point, it's really great when you get a horse that you can really feel it when horses are trying for you. And as I said, if you're beating them up every day or making them comfortable, even with just a bad fitting saddle, they're not going to want to do it. It's as simple as that. They have to be in no pain and be enjoying this process and not pushed beyond their limits, either mentally or physically. This is all really good. I love how your legs are matching the stride of the horses. That's exactly what we want. Done a really nice job with this. Now you can see how you lose his attention here occasionally, but you seem to be completely aware of that. Like right here, you open him back up again. Like to see him stretching a little deeper, but away you go and you get that. So every time I'm about to think, well, you need to do this, you do it. So, and you're getting a very good result. This is excellent work. And once again, just look how pleasant this horse looks. It looks like it's enjoying itself. It's out for a walk with you. Horses will want to be around you if you treat them like this. Then it's fun for them. You become their friend, just like any other, your pet. You discipline your pet, but that doesn't mean it's still your friend, right? Well, a horse can be that way too. Unfortunately, so many people have been taught this idea. I call it rent string mentality, that horses have to be beaten into whatever we get them to do, that they have to be made to do it, and they have to be made to understand that they must do it at all costs, Well, that really never really works, because any horse that's been forced to do things and is doing something because it's afraid not to, the mistake happens, and this is where people get killed all the time. Because if you train a horse that way, what happens is one day the horse will know that it's in a wrong position to take a jump, but it will take it anyway because it's afraid to jump. And this is how people get killed, because now the horse is scared to death, so it goes ahead and tries to do it and lands in the middle of the fence and flips over on top of the rider, and kills them or breaks their neck or whatever the case may be, or crushes their hips. And we're seeing this happen day after day in the show ring these days, and people just, they're worried about, they're trying to buy more vests that blow up and helmets and that protect them. But the reality is, as I said, if no one ever had a helmet, but everyone rode their horses over their backs, everyone would be a lot better off, a lot safer, and there'd be a lot less people getting killed on horseback than there are today. Because the problem even with those blow-up vests, if a horse falls on top of you, it's not going to feel good. But look how beautifully this horse is stretching into this contact now. And that's what we're talking about. And look how this horse's neck needs to be almost straight down to get that really big step. But if you look at the back there, you can still see going around there, there's still a bit of a dip in this horse's back. So this horse has a ways to come. It's nowhere near completed in its development. Those withers are going to pull up. A year from now, this horse will look like it's at least a half a hand taller than it is now, and it will not look so downhill, and you'll be amazed at also how the back will not look so long. When you see the horse now, it looks like the back is extremely long. But as that front end develops correctly, all of a sudden the horse will begin to look more proportionate, and that's exactly what we want to have happen. And that's when you know your work is right, when your horses are becoming more beautiful. This is one thing that never ceases to amaze me with people today, is their horses are becoming uglier by the minute. They're turning into these twisted, knotted up looking things, and everybody seems to think it's okay, and they're not noticing. Of course, that's because they're being given scores in show rings, or in the case of jumpers, they're winning for a while until the wheels fall off. That's the problem. Just lovely work here. I'm not saying much about what you're doing because it's all really good. I could just sit here and put on a piece of music and watch this go along. This is really exactly what you want to see with this horse. And every time, like right there, it got a little bit slow, but as soon as it does, you get it better and swinging a little more actively. So you're doing everything exactly the way I would like it to be done with this. I'm not seeing anything here that you need to go, you need to improve this much. You're doing it exactly right now. So now it's on to the next step for you. Would be the next step to see this horse now being, then lunge with some tack on, with maybe some long side reins, and see how that goes. See if the horse is actually really accepting the contact with the bridle, which I'm sure it is. And then from there on to the riding, which I certainly would think this horse is ready to, at least in the walk and trot. Though some of these kind of horses will surprise you, I have found that a lot of the heavier and crossbred horses, especially the ones bred with some of the American breeds, more like Percherons and some of these things, that really weren't bred to trot at all. Very often they will have a better canter than they have a trot. And that's perfectly okay, because the rule of thumb is the horse must be over its back. So if you have a better canter, that is, the horse is more over its back in the canter, or can get over its back in the canter, it's perfectly fine to canter. So that's the hard and fast rule of this. That's all there is to it. As Mr. Oliveira used to say, he said, that while there are certain movements in Grand Prix, there's plenty of movements beyond Grand Prix, and even ones beyond, the sort of traditional ones, where he used to do canter backwards and flying changes backwards and all this kind of thing. And his point was, well, as long as the horse stayed relaxed and stayed over its back, all of these things were perfectly fine to do, and they were doing them without any stress. Now, that would be very different. Some of the people, those of you who know a little bit about the history of dressage, someone like James Phillis, who someone once wrote of, he was playing interesting music on horribly out-of-tune instruments. And you see the pictures of him, and the horses' mouths are wide open, the tongue's hanging out, and he's doing all these weird gaits with them in Spanish walks backwards, but they always look miserable in the process, where if you see Mr. Oliveira do many of these same similar things, the horses look round and they look relaxed. So there being the idea that we must keep the horse over the back all the time. That's what makes the difference, and of course that's what keeps the horse relaxed and sound. So here, once again, we get a little bit slow coming through that corner. And that's where you'd want to speed them up. And of course you do. That's still a little slow right there. And of course, that's the big difference to understand. When people will see what we're doing, and they will say, oh, this is just like the Western people going around with the peanut rolling. Well, it isn't at all, because those people aren't doing anything, but their horses' heads are down, but they're not moving. They're never asking them to come through. I suppose if they did, it might be an easy thing. It'd be interesting to try to work one of those horses that have been trained that way. But those horses just kind of get this broken kind of look where their heads and necks are down to the ground, but their backs are completely disunited at the same time. So that's not at all what we're trying to do. We're just trying to find a position that allows the back to engage over the top line, so the horse can balance between the two ends, because the horse can never actually be balanced between the two ends unless it lifts its back. So all these old ideas about how there should be so much weight on the back end or weight on the front end kind of arguments, it isn't as simple as that. It's whether the horse is lifting its back. A horse can lower its hindquarters and be completely hollow in the back. So, so it doesn't mean it's connecting. It doesn't mean it's correct. That kind of piaffe, for instance, where the horse is hollow and lowering, is really damaging to the horse. Just like anything else, the horse must be lifting through the back to do a correct piaffe, not just lowering the hindquarters and bending the joints, because that would put so much stress on those legs, which is, of course, why a bad piaffe will blow out a horse's legs. A good piaffe will not. That is, a good piaffe where the horse stays lifted through the back so that all those joints can line up. Once again, it has everything combines through the back. If you think about it, if you think about how the horse pushes behind, even watching this horse here a little bit, and you see when he gets really good how you can see the hind leg gets deep under the body, the neck is out long, but you see more push up through the back, and it rounds up and lifts the front end. That's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to thrust, lifts the front end out of the way so the front legs can just swing free and get out of the way of the back legs. But if the horse doesn't push through the back, that doesn't happen. So, for instance, when you have a horse that forges, it forges because it's trying to come through behind, but can't get over its back. We see a lot of horses, these really well-bred warm bloods these days, and I see, oh well, I can't keep shoes on the horse; it's pulling the shoes off and forging all the time, because they've got this horse that's built with this giant back end, but they've got it so hollow the front end can't get off the ground to get out of the way. But of course, nowadays they just pull the head up higher, hollow the back, and just try to get the knees to jerk up in the air, which is not the answer, and is certainly not what collection is. In real collection, what we lose in forward motion, we gain in lift. So there's still a sense of roundness to the stride, as opposed to this sort of angular leg action kind of so-called collection, which isn't collection at all. It's just a shortening of the horse's stride. Now this is beautiful here. Look how beautifully this horse is just floating over the ground here. And once again, how lovely and relaxed the horse is through all this work. Now that's really quite optimal there. And you notice even here how the horse now is holding the neck out a little more naturally from the body when it's still in the optimal trot. You also really already get a sense with this horse that it's moving on its own. You're not having to send it forward with every step. So it's getting in the zone and getting that place where it just, like a runner, feels great, and it just locks into the stride and it feels good to it. Any kind of physical body, it feels great to do something like that aerobic kind of exercise where you just, as a physical entity, we just kind of get it all out by doing that. We all need to do that from time to time. And just, sort of exalt in our physicality, so to speak. Well, the horse does too. And imagine a horse is an animal of flight, so its protection is to run away. So when they feel really good and supple, they also feel really safe. Think of it that way, because, they feel more powerful, and don't think, horses know their own limitations. Don't think they don't. All animals do. Some, people have this idea, I think, that animals don't think, or they don't think about themselves or whatever. But they certainly do, and they know what they're capable and what they're not. I mean, watch any horses out in the pasture. Watch how the ones who decide to be the alpha ones and those who are not. It's a choice that they make. Hey, I'm willing. But they know their limitations. I mean, the one that's the top stallion, or even if it's an alpha mare with a bunch of horses, she's usually the one that's the most powerful looking, because of course they feel powerful, and therefore they feel secure in themselves. So why do horses relax when we do the things we do? It's for those reasons alone, as well as the fact that, they're enjoying the process, but it also makes them feel good about themselves. Think of it that way. Think of how many, every mental health person in the world will tell you one of the most important and beginnings to get people either over alcohol or any other kind of mental whatever is to get them exercising. How terrible it is for people who don't exercise mentally. Now look how beautifully this horse is going over the ground, and look how beautiful. And once again, now the neck is being held more out. And if you look at the back, you'll see the back is actually more lifted in the middle of the back. So compared to where we started, this back is much flatter now, and by virtue of it, it's connecting more over the back, and so the neck is being able to carry out longer. And so we're not only getting that nice bounce in the stride, but we're getting a longer stride now. In other words, the back leg is thrusting the horse more into the air and sending it more forward with each stride. Always remembering that forward means to engage forward under the body, not to run fast. Sometimes we have to get horses active, that is, and that's when they feel like they're running. Then we have to slow that down. So once in a while, just to get a horse woken up a little bit, we have to just get them active before we can get them forward, meaning to actually engage underneath themselves. Beautiful trot here. So you've done a wonderful job with this horse. Everything is just right on track here. I really look forward to seeing you riding this horse. And I'm sure it's a weather thing there, but hopefully the weather, it looks like this. I don't see any snow on the ground, so that's great. So hopefully everybody over there who doesn't have an indoor will be able to start working their horses a little more. That's just an absolutely lovely trot that you're getting right there. Once again, that's exactly what you would want. Now, so when you're riding, that's what you're looking for. And then once again, the horse needs to stretch his neck a little bit lower there. So perfectly all right to let it. Because they'll start to want to do it feels good to them. I mean, just like a person who leans over, you learn to really stretch to the ground if you learn how to do a correct stretch from the waist, and it pulls everything straight and just feels good. Animals, once again, they think about all these same things that you and I do. They feel the same things you and I do. That's why it's so important for animals, for humans rather, to keep themselves in the best physical shape that it can and work out all the time as well. Because you must have some empathy. If you're just a complete slob and you're coming out working horses, how are you? You're not going to really understand what the horse is going through in this process. So it's so important that we try to keep ourselves in the best shape that we can all the time. Then we'll have an empathy for what the horse and one of those things is also giving yourself a rest once in a while. It's not just all exercise, and it's the same thing with horses. Once in a while, they need a couple of weeks of just doing not much, and just let them hang out and go out in the pasture, and just chill out for a little bit, and you start back. Not more than 2 weeks. 2 weeks is about right, though, for downtime, because longer than that, you start to lose muscle tone. So 2 weeks rest for humans, our horses, is really optimal at any time. So great job here. I hope I get to see you this summer. And I really look forward to seeing your next video. This is absolutely wonderful what you've done with this horse. He's really in a lovely working trot in a stretch. That is, he's working over his back in the stretch. So hopefully you should be able to translate all of that to under saddle here pretty soon and have a horse that's actually working wonderfully for you and will become a companion and friend. We want them to be our friends. This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. Great work here today. Look forward to seeing all of our friends in Europe this summer. I'm just getting ready to leave for Australia here in a few days. Looking forward to meeting all of our new friends down there for the first time. So keep up the great work, and I'll see everybody soon.